Thank you for joining us on the Going Deeper podcast, a ministry of Fathom Church in Littleton, Colorado. You will never get to the bottom of the depths that are in Christ for you. And our hope with this podcast is that it will help you go deeper with God. So let's dive into this episode of the Going Deeper podcast. What's up, everyone? This is your host, Kyle Knight, and welcome to the Going Deeper podcast. Man, we hope that these conversations can help you go deeper in your relationship with God. I'm in the podcast studio with our very own missions minister, Karina Boss. Hello, Karina.
Hey.
And our lead pastor, Chris Martin. Hello, Chris.
Hey, buenos dias.
Buenos dias. Hey, you can see by the title of this episode, we're going to be talking about, should Christians boycott Disney? Chris, we were just chatting about this before we hit record. Why is this the topic of today's episode? And why is this such a hot topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're coming into summer, and summer means vacations, and vacations means Disney, especially if you have children. And so, yeah, I just think this is a pretty live topic. Not just because it's summer and we have families with young kids, but I think this question has been coming to a head. I can remember this being some of the conversation years ago, but I feel like it's becoming more and more of a mountain that we are coming up against as the culture wars rage on, right? As the cultural left pushes an agenda, and lots of businesses, Disney included, are taking up arms in that culture war with a left-leaning agenda. Christian parents who tend to be, I'm using gross generalizations here, okay, who tend to be more politically moderate or conservative, are now, I think, asking more and more the question, is this okay to support, / is this okay to let my children consume, / should I outright boycott something like this? And so I think that's a pretty live question. I think it's a live political issue. I mean, you're seeing this. I'm seeing this on social media and different places where, an agenda piece will be pushed forward, and a character will say this in a show, or they'll put up these episodes of this show in Disney Plus or whatever it might be, and then the right kind of rages against that machine and starts to throw a fit and say, well, then we're gonna everybody cancel Disney Plus, and we're gonna boycott this. And I think it's a live issue specifically for our families at our church. So, when we're just real quick, by the way, we're talking about Disney here. Okay. Disney owns ABC. Disney owns ESPN. Disney owns Star Wars. Disney owns Marvel. Disney owns National Geographic. Do they own Discovery too?
Oh, no, you're right. National Geographic.
Nat Geo. They own Nat Geo. Disney owns every little girl's heart in the world, right? Like, I mean, this is Pixar. I mean, we're talking not just about Cinderella here. We're talking about a international media conglomerate that owns everything. So, should we boycott Disney as Christians?
Yeah, I'll give my first initial thoughts on this, because I'm a fan of Disney. My family, we've gone a few times, and we've taken the kids a few times. And this is something that, especially this boycotting thing over the last few years or whatever. I have younger kids, so it might be a little bit different. But I have younger kids that we are obviously still making decisions for, that I am trying to protect my kids. I'm trying to protect what they see and hear and experience, those sorts of things. And so I remember the last few years with this whole boycott thing, whether it was Disney and other things. I always just kind of pushed it aside, and I was always just kind of like, oh gosh, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing. People are just over exaggerating things. They're getting a little too I always just didn't really think much of it. Just I think until like as my kids are growing and they're, consuming more things and more media things and everything like that, and now asking questions about things that they're seeing. Yeah, I've gotten more like not in the sense of like, yeah, I'm gonna like boycott everything now, but not just pushing that aside and taking more of a critical look at yeah, what we watch as a family, like what we watch as a family, what we experience as a family, what my kids are seeing. And like there's been a few specifically, and I love Disney stuff, but there's been a few even like recent movies and stuff like that that I haven't let my kids watch because I've read reviews on it. Like I'm just a little bit more aware and not just pushing it aside saying, "Oh, that's just for, the people who are like so crazy about all this stuff and just need something to boycott." It's just been more on my mind lately now that it's like, man, it really is everywhere. And I have kids growing up in this world that I'm trying my best to protect. And so having younger kids, I think it's a lot more on my mind because I'm making the decisions on what to turn on the TV or whatever, like to watch and stuff. Karina, I'd love your thoughts on having older kids, and them making their own decisions and kind of what your kind of input in that is still.
Yeah. We are Disney fans at our house also. More along the parks. We really enjoy the parks. Some of our family's best memories have been at the park. So it's just a place that my family loves. But also, I mean, I have sons who grew up on Star Wars, and I have a daughter who grew up watching princess movies. So I just feel like this is a multi-layer issue because, as Chris pointed out, Disney films do influence our children, and you can see it by their request to watch Frozen on repeat. You can see it in their request to be Darth Vader for Halloween. For Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
If you have questions about Halloween costumes, you can go back a few episodes for Christmas, whatever. So to sit here and say, well, my kids can watch anything and it doesn't influence them. That is just not true because we can see otherwise. But also I think a true boycott, like you were saying, Chris, is Disney owns so many things. So if you're truly going to boycott them to the fullest extent, they have their fingers in so many things that I think you have to really kind of evaluate, is that realistic? Is that even something you can do? And yeah.
So here, let me throw a few things out there. Specifically, and we've not mentioned this yet, but specifically, one of the main banners that they are waving, that Disney specifically is waving, is the LGBTQ banner. Just is.
Yep.
I went to Disneyland last summer with another dad. For we brought our daughters from our church as a special birthday present to go to Disney with 2 dads and 2 daughters, and we were there in June, which is Pride Month. And we were mistaken often as being a couple, because listen, there were a lot of that. There was a lot of that going on. So it's at the parks, this agenda. It's certainly in the shows and in the movies. I mean, even the last Star Wars movie had a girl to girl kiss in it. We were watching Elemental, which is a new, is it Pixar or Disney movie? I don't know.
Animated.
It's an animated movie. And there's, a scene with, this is my sister and her girlfriend kind of thing. I was reading that, like, in the new Muppet Babies, there's a whole moment where Gonzo is a girl. He decides he's a girl, like in a cartoon on Disney Plus for children. So it's there, not just on the screens, but also in the parks. They're celebrating it. I mean, it is very there. So what do we do with that? Like, what do we do with that piece? Specifically, I think with teens and older kids, it's a different story than with younger kids, I think it's a live issue. So I don't know. I just love to throw that out there. And what do you do with that?
Yeah, I think I process it a little different because I do have high schoolers. Every single one of my kids
Right.
is high school or older, and you can engage in conversation differently than you can a 5-year-old.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, you can say like, what is going on and how do
Mhm.
we process this? Is this okay? Is this not okay? It's just way different than with a 5-year-old because they don't necessarily understand what you're saying. Like
Mhm.
I can be blunt with my high schoolers.
Mhm.
You can be less blunt with a
Mhm.
5-year-old. And
Mhm.
Right.
and even in a conversation with like Muppet babies, like what does that mean to you? It just gets a little bit more gray and a little less clear in conversation to really understand how they process that.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's hard. And it is hard.
Family pastor Kyle
Man.
Knight,
And
his response
Yeah, it
as to
is.
should we boycott Disney is it's hard.
This is hard. No, it is hard. And I think it's fair to say, like, I don't, it's having young ones who, I mean, one isn't going to understand any of it. But one that's old enough that has seen some of these little like moment things and asked a question or thought it was really weird. I've had some good conversations with my 7-year-old boy about some of these things. But again, yeah, it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult thing when they don't really know what that is and why it's wrong. But I would say, like for me, with my kids at my age, if they're seeing it, it's the perfect time to talk about it. It has given me and my son a lot of conversations about a lot of opportunities to have conversations about how he was created and how God created all of us and his right plan in creation and in creating humans and male and female and so we've had some really good conversations about this. Yeah, he kind of I mean, he's a typical 7-year-old boy that as we're kind of getting into it, he just dismisses it and he doesn't care and he just wants to move on and he doesn't want to take it that seriously, which I understand. But I think this is just these kind of instances are really important for parents to not just push it away like I used to, and to take it seriously and to have conversations with your kids. Honestly, no matter how old they are, appropriate conversations with their with whatever age that they're at, but to address these things, to see what they think of it, to talk truth to them and to speak truth into their lives at such a young age, and to get them to kind of be critical thinkers of what they're seeing all of the time, because it's not just and it's not just this, it's the stuff they hear at school. It's I mean, we dealt with that too with Austin, of just some things like some friends say and everything like that, and stuff that they hear from their parents or whatever like that. And so especially if they're talking about it, if they're having questions about it, that is the best thing to do, is to lovingly and graciously like speak truth to them and come alongside them and teach them these things and talk to them about how God really designed us and how God really designed this world. So it's not an easy thing. It's kind of just it's a conscience thing that it's like, okay, like being wise about what you're watching, what you're going to watch. As parents, talk about it. Husband and wife talk about these sorts of things. Don't just kind of push this off to the side. But
yeah, that's good. I did. So here's maybe some advice that I'd get. I'm reading a book right now about essentially childhood and parenting in this next generation. And one of the things that the author said is that we have this generation of parents right now. We have a tendency to over parent in the real world and under parent when it comes to media. So he would say we over parent, like we're just watching our kids with their helmets and their, their safety guards and their, I mean, we're just all like the idea of free play, like, hey, I'm just going to go down to the park and play. I'm going to run out front and play with my friends, is becoming a less and less accepted thing as parents helicopter and kind of, hover more and just really very, very protective. Like I remember as a child walking 4 or 5 blocks to go to the baseball card store. Like when I was in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, just like I was allowed to walk to the store, buy a pack of cards and walk home by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like
It's unheard of.
that's like they'd lock you up and put
Yeah.
you in, they'd take your children away from you for that. But like he would say we are overprotective in how we parent in the real world, but we are underprotective in how we parent in the digital world. And he's talking social media and internet, but I think multimedia like shows and movies can be thrown into here on this one. So here's my advice for parents. You need to know what your children are consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So listen to me, Fathom Church, parents at Fathom Church, lots of new babies being born. Disney Plus is not a babysitter. It is not an appropriate babysitter. Even if you put the filters on for certain age restrictions, etc., you are letting a global organization determine what is appropriate for Y7. And they don't share your same values. So you need to be really careful. Does that mean that I need to preview everything that my kid watches? Hey, listen to me. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't mean that facetiously. Yes, you do. You need to, and there are lots of resources online. There's Common Sense Media. You can, do a bunch of Google searches and find ways. Like there are websites that'll help you with this, but ultimately it's on you. It's on you to make sure that what your child is watching is appropriate. And you're right. You guys are right. Like different ages, different levels of appropriateness. I am not an advocate of protecting your children from every encounter with these things, because I think it's really important for you to engage at age appropriate times with these issues. So Kyle, I think you're doing a great job of having those conversations. One thing I always tell parents is don't answer questions your kids aren't asking. So like your kid, like Austin may not be wanting to have those conversations yet, because he's just like, I don't know, I just want to play basketball. It's like, that's like, okay, cool. 7-year-old boy, like let him do his thing, but answer the questions that they're asking, have those conversations. Here's a crazy thought. Watch their shows with them, right? I mean, I know the break that it is to turn on a show and then get some stuff done while your kid is, zoned out on a screen. But it's a meaningful thing for you to be able to engage with them on those things. Gosh, let's up our parenting game on devices. Please, like if your kid's got a phone or a tablet or internet or a computer or even Disney Plus, an app on your smart TV, you need to parent there. You need to be vigilant there. But let's just say that that's an assumed baseline. Okay. We are going to monitor at some level and be a filter for what our children are consuming. The larger than question becomes back to the original one. Should we be supporting this? $15 a month, $6,000 for a trip to a park. Should movie theater tickets? I mean, you're right. Like ESPN, should we? Is this what we should be giving our money to, or is this something that Christians should boycott?
This is what I always come down to. This might not be a popular opinion. I don't know, but the moment you start boycotting, let's say Disney, you have to turn your eyes to Target, because they have the same thing. June is Pride Month and they embrace it fully, and whatever, they support questionable things.
Don't throw Target under the bus.
Don't throw Target.
All the Christian moms are going to be like, no.
But they're on the same level. I mean, I don't think you could say one is different than the other. You're pouring money into both. And then pretty soon it's like, okay, Starbucks, they have similar support, whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I have to boycott GMC. Actually, I don't know anything about GMC, but
and Apple, right? Because Apple supports the LGBTQ movement, and let's get started on Amazon.
Yes.
Oh crud! Because now, how am I going to order paper towels? So
So I think it's a quickly tumbling. Yeah. We have to realize we live in the world, and that the world is moving opposite of God. Now, I'm not saying that the new movie that comes out that's promoting heavily on an issue we don't agree with, I'm not saying, hey, yeah, go spend all your money and watch that movie that you don't agree with. That's different. But I think the moment you're like, that's it, Disney's not getting another one of my pennies, was like, can you live without Target? Can you live without a phone? I don't think one cell phone company is probably different on any issue. So can I drive a car? Like, it just becomes a really quickly tumbling movement that I think we have to realize we live in a world where most things are run by people who have opposite ideals of us.
Yeah, you got to be careful and you got to be wise. But I always say, don't be surprised when pagans act like pagans. Right? So you're right. Like, it is impossible to exist in a world where you only spend money on things that match up 1-to-1 with your ideology or your worldview. That's an impossibility. Now, there might be some responsibility that some people feel and want to, bite onto to say, hey, I don't feel right giving my money as much to that as opposed to this. You have every right to do that. Absolutely. And if your conscience is bound by that, we talk about this all the time in this podcast, conscious issues, right? There are matters of conscience and then there are matters of scripture, right? In matters of scripture, we say we will always obey and default to the text. But matters of conscience, we can agree to disagree upon. And you've got to discern that within your own spirit, within your own heart. And so, I think you're right. I don't think that's, it might be an unpopular take for some, but I think it's a great take, Karina, that you have freedom in Christ to support Disney. Right. And you have freedom in Christ to not support, to boycott Disney. You have freedom in both. What you don't have freedom to do is to say that one or the other is the only way that Christians should behave. That's where you don't have freedom, because Romans 14 makes that really, really clear, that you need to bear with one another in love, even as you disagree upon these secondary or tertiary options. So, but I'm going to say this with confidence. Kyle, you should start boycotting Disney.
I should.
I'm sensing it from the Lord right now, dude.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I agree with what Karina said. And I think for me, it's and again, we've talked about this a lot on these kind of issues, but it comes down to wisdom, and it comes down to what you feel like is right for you and your family. And I have down here on some of my notes and talking about boycotting is I was reading this article about this, and it was talking about rebuking versus boycotting. And it went into like what like boycotting really is, and all that stuff with like kind of protesting to, for like the means of economic coercion, which I'm not going to get into, but then it talked about rebuking, and it talked about how like Christians should still call out sin. And we've talked about this a lot in our sermon series in 1 Samuel, a bunch, when we talk about sin, and we talk about how we need to take it seriously, and we need to drag it out into the light and all that stuff. And so I would just like my response to all this, and my kind of insight in this would just to be just to say to parents, and man, whether it's parents or whether you're old and empty nesters or whatever like that, and whether it's Disney and all this other stuff, is to be wise about this, but to also know know truth, and know when what you're seeing and what is out, like Karina talked about, what is worldly, and call out sin and call out those things, and but also be, and again, we've talked about this many times with different things, how this kind of falls along that that kind of gray area, but to be loving to whoever's whoever decides on one side of the other, and that's fine. But yeah, I would just say just be wise in what you're buying, what you're taking your kids to, what you're looking at. I just think it's super important. So again, I feel like this is one of those issues that that you're just bound to wisdom on you and your family. So.
And I think, we talked a lot about talking about LGBTQ. That's kind of a big trending one, but I think there was certain shows my kids were not allowed to watch because they like lying was rewarded. They were demeaning to other cultures. They disrespected authority. Like there was a lot of issues in some shows that I was like, no, this is not what we're going to watch, because it's like creating habits and mindsets that are actually more subtle than LGBTQ.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of that as well.
Yes, and that's why I think again, like parents, you got to parent.
Mm-hmm.
There is no turn your brain off babysitter that you wouldn't allow somebody that you don't know to just like watch your kids and like do whatever they want with your kids without first vetting them and getting to know. I mean, like, or at least I hope you wouldn't, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, the world that we live in right now is safetyism from parents in the real world, but then we just kind of like throw them in front of a TV and let it go, right? Like we just kind of let anything happen.
Yeah.
And I think, gosh, more vigilance from Christian parents around these kinds of things. Yeah. Guess what? It's going to take some time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Guess what? Sometimes it feels like Marcy and I are like, do we need to watch, like we put, like Harper goes to bed. It's like, do we need to watch that new Disney movie? So, cause she's been wanting us, she's been wanting to see it and we haven't seen it and we don't want to expose her to it until we've seen it. And so it's like, okay, I guess we got to watch a cartoon. Like, yeah.
2 adults.
I mean, it's somewhat,
For sure.
Welcome to parenting.
Yep.
Welcome to parenting.
Yep.
Right. Like that's part of the gig.
Yeah.
So listen, if you feel in your conscience that you need to, send your money elsewhere, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's okay. I wouldn't put that on somebody else. And if you feel like you can appropriately and wisely vet some of this stuff, then I think good on you as well. This is a matter of freedom. It's a matter of conscience. It's not a matter of right or wrong or law. But church, you better turn your brain on. That's for sure. That's a for sure.
Yeah.
Because the world is discipling our kids, and we better have a better discipleship to offer them.
That's a really good word to end on. Yeah, and church, if you have any questions about this, or if you want to, if you want to talk about this, if you want to ask questions, if you are concerned, if you're a parent and concerned, please come to us and talk to us about this. But hey, yeah, that was a good word from both of you. Thank you guys so much for this conversation.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks,
Chris.
Kyle.
Thank you, Karina. And thank you, church, for listening, and we'll catch you next time.